Um, we are on to our next video lecture. We have gone over both supply and demand, and now we will be going over equilibrium. Kind of how the forces of supply and demand balance each other out. That's kind of why we have these rocks here. I just want to give a shout out to my friend Tim Taylor, who provided me with this PowerPoint. I don't know if it's his, I think it is, but you know, I've modified it quite a bit, but the original template was from him. Anyways, let's get right into it with our learning goals. What do you need to know? What do you need to learn by the end of this video lecture? Well, you should be able to define equilibrium, know what equilibrium is, and how supply and demand work together to create equilibrium. Secondly, kind of what I just said, sorry for repeating myself, but again, we need to know how these work together. And finally, we need to know how the explain how the price mechanism has a signaling function. How prices and quantities send messages to both consumers and primarily producers to change things within the market in order to move towards equilibrium. And kind of understand like what is good about markets, why markets are efficient. And let's get right to it. Well, equilibrium. What is equilibrium? Equilibrium is sometimes defined as a state of rest, right? Basically, it is where the quantity supplied equals quantity demanded. Again, it also means, like in the, if you looked it up in the Latin meaning, I believe it's at a state of rest. It's basically where the forces of supply and demand are at rest. Quantity supplied equals quantity demanded, and it's where the price and quantities match up. It's where they cross. It's where the curves cross. All you have to do is draw a straight horizontal line from that equilibrium point where, if you think about it, supply and demand almost looks like an X with the downward sloping demand and the upward sloping supply. Where they cross, that intersection, is equilibrium. Draw a line over that's perfectly parallel to the x-axis. Draw a line to the y-axis. That will be your price. Draw another line directly down that is parallel to the y-axis down to the x-axis, and you'll get the equilibrium quantity. And I'll show you what that looks like in just a second. It's pretty simple. Let me show you what I mean. But also, please remember that demand does not equal supply. We say that quantity demanded equals quantity supplied. It is where the curves intersect. They are not equal. If you say demand equals supply, that doesn't make sense because the curves are representations of different numbers. And finally, disequilibrium is a state where the prices and quantities are not in equilibrium, where they do not match, and this kind of will trigger the price mechanism. Let me show you what I mean. Okay, let's take something we all love, ice cream. You can see, we've talked about this too, that when you see a demand curve or a supply curve, it is really a representation of numbers. And on the left, you can see the numbers associated with the demand curve. As you can, the law of demand states, as the price goes up, the quantity demanded goes down. As you see, at 50 cents, only or a bunch, 13 are demanded. A lot of people want ice cream, but as the price rises to $1, then it drops to 11. It rises again to $1.50. It drops to 9. So again, that is the law of demand and action. Conversely, on the right side, you see the numbers that represent the supply curve. You can see that at 50 cents, only one ice cream cone will be provided. But as the price goes up, suppliers are willing to provide a higher quantity. And again, this is due to the law of supply that says as prices rise, quantity supplied also rises. Equilibrium is where basically these two forces, these two curves, equal each other. And I hope you can both see right now, just by looking at these two tables, where does quantity supplied equal quantity demanded at a given price. And hopefully you all see that it's right there at $2. $2, the quantity supplied is 7, and the quantity demanded is 7. Let's show you what that looks like. Here's our demand curve based on the information from the previous page. Here's our supply curve based on the demand curve or the supply curve of the previous page. We just said that, you know, if we draw a line parallel to the x-axis over to the y-axis or price axis, it will equal $2, kind of like we saw in our previous in our table, right? And we can also see the quantity, is 7 at that price for both supply and demand. So equilibrium is achieved. So basically that means in this market, you know, the equilibrium price is $2 and the equilibrium quantity is $7. Now it's important to understand why is it that we always are guided to this equilibrium price and quantity. And this has to do with sort of the signaling functions of price, how price sort of tells producers and consumers on some level about the market. So let's take the example of something called a surplus, or it's also known as excess demand. Let's say that producers decided to raise the price higher than equilibrium. They wanted to make more money, because of course, who doesn't want to make more money? So they raised the price to $2.50. Well, the price at $2.50, the quantity supplied is 10. However, the quantity demanded at that price is 4. And if, you know, I'm going to backtrack here a little bit. If we look at our table and we look at that price of $2.50, we can see the quantity supplied is 10 and the quantity demanded is 4. So again, these numbers match up with what's going on at the table. Let me just get back to that last slide. Okay. And what happens? Well, if the quantity supplied is 10 and the quantity demanded is 4, what's happening in the marketplace? Well, producers are making more ice cream than what is being sold. Basically, you've got about 6 units that customers aren't purchasing at that price. And because ice cream is something, even though it's frozen, it won't last forever. You know, producers wouldn't want to make something and just have it sit there and not sell it. It's kind of a waste of energy and resources. Why make something if no one's going to buy it? So again, if producers raise their price and keep making more goods and services because they want to make more money, and they can't sell it, basically we have a surplus. There's excess supply. And that kind of tells producers, okay, I've made a whole bunch and I've raised my prices, and not as many people are purchasing it at these prices. What should I do? Well, I need to lower my price. And also, if you think about it in terms of the producer, they're only selling 4 units at that price. So if you looked at their revenue, what is the producer revenue at a price of $2.50? Well, they're selling 4. 4 times $2.50 is 10. They're only selling $10 worth of ice cream. They've got $6 of ice cream just sitting around. However, if they were to lower their price and make less and go back to equilibrium, right, they would be selling 7 ice cream cones at $2, which is a total revenue of $14. So of course they'd rather make more money. So that high price has just told them that, you know, they're losing money when they raise the price too high. So again, the producers will lower the price and produce less, and as that happens, we will move back towards equilibrium. The same thing kind of happens with a shortage. It's very similar. Let's say we have a price that is below equilibrium, right? And at a price that is lower than equilibrium, you can kind of see if we're at 150, the quantity demanded is 10. People want a lot more at that low price. However, producers were not willing to supply as much at that low price. Well, if quantity demanded is greater than quantity supplied, we have got a shortage. Basically, the number demanded by customers is greater than the number supplied by the producers. So what happens there? Well, if you think about it, if you're making ice cream cones, what's happening in your store is that you're sort of constantly running out. You don't have enough to satisfy the consumers. There are lines and people aren't getting the things that they want from you. So what does that tell you as a producer you need to do? You need to raise your price and also increase output. Because obviously, everybody's willing to buy what you have at the current price. Maybe you want to raise your price and make more. And so that's what they do. They raise their price back to $2. As the price goes up, quantity supplied, according to the law of supply, goes up as well. And quantity demanded will go down as the price goes up until we go back to our magical point, equilibrium. Okay. So, I hope that is very clear. I want to just talk about one other little thing that sort of happens when there is a shift in the curve. Again, and this is more of the price mechanism at work. If, for example, we have a decrease in demand, demand falls. And this is due to one of the determinants, whether it's taste and preferences, whether it's income has gone down, or maybe the market has shrunk in terms of demographic population. It could have to do with related goods. For whatever reason, demand has dropped. As you probably remember, when demand drops, that means that the quantity demanded at every available price is now lower. And so now when we look at that old price of $2.50, previously when people liked, let's say it was taste and preferences, and if it's ice cream, maybe they liked a certain flavor that was really popular at a time. Previously they were willing to pay $2.50 for 10 cones. That was the old quantity supplied equals quantity demanded. But now quantity demanded has dropped at every available price because people just don't want that anymore. Well, what this results in, at $2.50, we have a temporary surplus. And you can kind of see, if we drew a line from the old equilibrium price back to the y-axis, and it intersected with our new demand curve, you could see quantity supplied hasn't changed. Supply curve hasn't moved. However, the quantity demanded has changed at every price. And now at $2.50, there's a lot less quantity demanded. So now producers have a temporary surplus. And they realize that, okay, this flavor that used to be popular, that customers always loved, it was really kind of a cool flavor, isn't really as cool anymore. And so what we will have is, when we have a surplus, just like we did a moment ago, producers realize, okay, we have too much, we're going to need to lower the price and also lower the quantity supplied. And as they do that, the quantity demanded will rise until we go to the new equilibrium price. This could also happen with supply. Let's say supply shifts to the left. For whatever reason. Maybe the government puts a tax on ice cream because they're worried about obesity and diabetes, or maybe the price of milk has gone up and this has caused the supply of ice cream to shift to the left. For whatever reason, supply has shifted to the left. This will result in a temporary shortage. Quantity demanded hasn't changed, but now QS is lower at every available price level. And as you can see, when we have that change in supply, the temporary, after supply shifts to the left, you can draw a line from the old equilibrium over to the y-axis, and you can kind of see the new quantity supplied at that price. And With that new quantity supplied, it's much lower. Quantity supplied is smaller than quantity demanded. So basically what we've got here is a shortage. And that tells producers, okay, at that price, we keep running out, so what do we need to do? We need to raise our prices, and as they do that and create more, then the quantity demanded will go down until we go to equilibrium. So anyway, I hope that helps. I hope that makes sense. One site that I would recommend that is kind of great to learn about this with is one that is called from bized.co.uk. I recommend that everybody who's trying to learn supply and demand check this out. It's a great site. It allows you to manipulate the demand curve and see what happens when we have an increase in demand, that we'll have a temporary shortage. It also shows you, for example, what will happen if, what will happen regarding quantity supplied and quantity demanded. So go to that website. It's a great one. I'm sure they'd like the hits anyways. So check that out. Great website, bized.co.uk, and I hope you know after this video lecture, right, what was equilibrium? How do supply and demand work together to always sort of guide things towards equilibrium? And how did the price mechanism work? What happened if there was a change in demand or change in supply? This is just a brief lecture. We'll go over it more in class, but anyways, I hope this helps. Good luck, and we will see you on Montag.